Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to a new session from MAV Health and Wellness Committee. I'm your host Asma Shoaib. It's good to be back. Happy New Year, everyone. Whoever is watching, Happy New Year to the people who have joined us on Zoom. I hope this year has started with all health and safety. Everyone is boosted by now. They're taking care of themselves, as we have seen a surge in the cases of COVID-19 in our community, all around the country, especially in Prince William County in the past few months. So please be careful, wear your masks, and if you haven't gotten your booster shot, please try to get one as soon as possible. We are having a COVID vaccination clinic this coming Friday at Darul Noor from 12 to 2 p.m. So if you haven't gotten your shot, please be there, bring your vaccination card and you can get your vaccine. Please let everyone else know too in your network. So a lot of people can get vaccinated that day, and we can be a safe community and return back to normal as the CDC and everyone is expecting, inshallah. So for today's session, we have like our guest, if you can see it, Sister Talba Hassan. She is the chair of social services at Darun Noor. And joining me from legal services of Northern Virginia is Miss Beth McCord. She is a family practice lawyer, and she will go over some details on what are protective orders and how one can apply for that. So according to the data on CDC, and this data will change, of course, has changed lately, but according to data, like 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men will go over some kind of abuse in their relationship during their lifetimes. And this is a public health problem that can be avoided in many ways. And of course, using your civil right and taking those protective orders is one of them. Although it's not the most liked one, but this is one of them, how to be safe. So Ms. Beth, welcome to our session. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me tonight. Please tell us something about the organization that you are associated with. I know about it. I'm sure like some of us know about it, but a lot of people, they don't know what are their services and where are they located and how they can be in touch with the organization to like use the services that they offer. And then please go ahead and start the presentation on what are the protective orders and what are their types and how we can benefit from them if endangered in any way.
Okay, my name is Beth McCord, and I'm the managing attorney of the Loudoun office, which is in Leesburg, of Legal Services of Northern Virginia. And we have offices in Alexandria, Fairfax, Arlington, Prince William, Loudoun, and then we also do some work out in the Fredericksburg area. I've been representing victims of domestic violence, sexual assault victims, and stalking victims for probably 13 or 14 years now. And what I do is I represent these victims in protective order cases and other family law cases, such as child custody cases, child support, spousal support, and divorces. So let me share my screen here. Okay. Everyone deserves to be safe at home, at work, at school, with your children, with friends and family, in public community spaces, and in using technology. The definition of domestic violence varies, but the best one that we have found is to describe it as behavior between current or former relationship partners, such as a husband, a boyfriend, it can be a family member, such as a brother or sister, in which one tries to exert power and control over the other, usually through fear, using physical abuse, sexual, emotional, social, verbal, spiritual, economic, and other means. And yes, a person can be abused financially. And it also includes sexual assault, which is any sexual behavior or contact without voluntary and uncoerced consent, and that includes between spouses. Protective orders are a civil tool for safety. The criminal side would be criminal charges brought against an abuser, such as charges of assault and battery on a family member, or charges of criminal stalking, or property damage, or sexual assault. But the protective order is a civil tool. It's called in other states, it's referred to as restraining orders, orders of protection. In Virginia, they're called protective orders. And it's a court order that forbids the abuser from doing certain things. And the number one thing is from having contact with the victim. The purpose is to protect the health and safety of the petitioner, the victim, and it almost always limits contact, but it also provides other relief. It's an emergency type of relief. To start the process, you start by getting a preliminary protective order. That's abbreviated as PPO. A preliminary protective order is limited to 2 weeks. It lasts 2 weeks long. And how you get one is you go to the courthouse and you file for a protective order. If you're successful, you get a temporary preliminary protective order. It's for 2 weeks. And on that PPO will be the court date and time for your final protective order hearing. The final protective order hearing can give you a protective order that lasts up to 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, it's possible to get an extension. So you go to the courthouse, you file a petition for a protective order, and you get your preliminary protective order, which lasts 2 weeks. And on that order will be the date and time for your hearing on a final protective order. And that's going to be within about 2 weeks down the road. At that stage, when you're getting your preliminary protective order, you go and you go to the courthouse and you get that PPO without any notice to the abuser. So it's one of the rare cases in the law where you can go and you can get relief without the other side getting notice and having an opportunity to defend themselves. That's why it is limited to 2 weeks. So then you will need to decide whether or not you want to go forward and try to get that 2 week preliminary protective order extended to where it becomes a 2 year or sometimes less protective order. You can hire an attorney, it's preferable, but you don't have to have one. And when you go to that hearing, you have to prove your case. The abuser will have notice of that hearing, and he will have an opportunity to present his side, and you will have to present evidence to convince the judge that you qualify for your final protective order. Whereas when you go to court for your preliminary protective order, the abuser isn't going to be there. He doesn't have an opportunity to talk and present evidence. So then you go to the hearing for your final protective order. The respondent or the abuser, he may have an attorney present, he may not. The survivor or the victim, you will go first and you will tell the judge what happened and why you need your protective order. You'll be cross-examined by the abuser's attorney or by the abuser if the abuser decides to take his opportunity to cross-examine you, and then he will present his side of the story and his evidence, and then the judge will make a decision. Your protective order will be either granted or denied, and the order can be tailored. It doesn't have to be for 2 years. It could be for 1 year. It could be for 6 months. Let's see. Okay. What is required to get a protective order? There has to be an act of family abuse or an act of violence, force, or threat that occurred recently. So there are two different ways you can get a protective order. In family court, which is short for the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court, that is where if your abuser is a family member you will go to that court to get one type of protective order. If they're not a family member, such as you had an altercation with your neighbor and they pushed and punched you and you wanted a protective order, you would go to the district court. So you have to prove an act of family abuse for the family abuse protective order, or an act of violence, force, or threat for the non-family abuse protective order. And it has to have occurred recently. Recently is really going to depend on that particular judge on that particular day. It doesn't have to be yesterday. It could be within the past couple of months. But if it was, for example, the act was a couple months old, you're going to have to convince the judge that you had a good reason for waiting so long to file. So you're going to have to prove the act of a family abuse, or if it's non-family, act of violence, force, or threat that occurred recently, and that the order is necessary to protect the health and safety of the petitioner. There's an informal requirement of fear, that you are afraid for your safety. The abuse, at least some of it, has to have occurred in Virginia. Let me move this. And if you're filing in Loudoun County, it has to have occurred in Loudoun County, or either you or the respondent live in Loudoun County. Okay, what is family abuse? Family abuse is defined as any act involving violence, force, or threat that results in bodily injury or places one in reasonable apprehension of death, sexual assault, or bodily injury. And if you're getting a family abuse protective order, it has to be committed against a family or household member. And there's a long definition of family or household members. That would be a spouse, a boyfriend or girlfriend that you have cohabited with during the past 12 months. It could be someone that you have a child in common with. It could be a brother or sister. But we're about to get into the expansion of what a family or household member is. So some examples of acts of family abuse are forceful detention. For example, someone shoved you in your bedroom and locked you in there and you couldn't get out. Stalking is an example. Sexual assault, or any criminal offense that results in bodily injury or places one in reasonable apprehension of death, sexual assault, or bodily injury. So, for example, someone shoved you down the stairs and by some miracle you didn't have any injuries. Well, you didn't have a bodily injury, but it's reasonable for you to have been afraid that that was going to result in death or a bodily injury. So even though you weren't injured, it placed you in reasonable fear of it. So that would count as an act of family abuse. Family or household member, it's a really long list. Spouse, current or former. Parents or step-parents, children, stepchildren, siblings, half-siblings, grandparents, grandchildren, someone that you have a child in common with, or someone that you cohabited with, and by cohabited with, they mean in a romantic relationship within the last 12 months. Or any children of that cohabitating partner who you lived with. Any of these, only if you live together during the abuse, that applies for in-laws, mother-in-law, father-in-law, son-in-law. So for in-laws, you have to have been living together during the abusive act. Stalking is one act of family abuse that you can get a protective order. It has to be more than one occasion when the respondent committed intentional actions, purposely causing fear, or that person knows or reasonably should have known that what he was doing would cause you fear, and that the actions actually did cause you fear. if the stalker has actual notice that you did not want that contact, but they contact you or follow you anyway, then the law presumes that the stalker intended to cause you that fear. For example, if you think that somebody has been stalking you, for example, your ex-husband, it's not always, but it's usually good to clearly say, for example, if he keeps texting you, you want to text back, do not contact me anymore. You're to have no further contact with me. Your contact with me is unwelcome. Don't do it. Then if he continues to do that, the law presumes that he intended to cause you fear, even if he just keeps texting you to say, where are you? Where are you going? That sort of thing. It's presumed to be intended to cause you fear. So in addition to requiring that the abuser have no contact with you and or stay at least 500 feet away from you, there are other things that the protective order can do for you. So, for example, protection for your children. If a parent and a child have both been hurt, you can have your children listed as a protected person on the protective order. Adults can also file protective orders on behalf of their children. That's called a next friend protective order, where you file as the next friend of their child. And then the process is like getting a normal protective order. Okay, so we talked about the preliminary 2-week protective order, where all you have to go to court to do is go to court and you explain to the judge, either through an affidavit or sometimes in person, what happened. And you may or may not be issued your 2-week preliminary protective order, and then you come back 2 weeks later for a hearing on your final 2-year protective order. But there's also an emergency protective order that is most typically gotten when the police come to your house or the scene of the incident that you called the police for, and the police determine that you're in need of a protective order. They can call the magistrate and issue you what's called an emergency protective order. And that emergency protective order can require the abuser to have no contact with you, and it require them to leave the house, but it only lasts 72 hours. So it's just 72 hours. And what you want to do if you want protection for longer than 72 hours is you want to get to the courthouse and file your petition for a protective order. Here's a little more information on the emergency protective order. It's issued by the magistrate, usually with the officer being involved in getting it for you. It can be requested by an officer or the survivor. The legal requirement is there has to be probable danger of further acts of family abuse, or a criminal warrant was issued. It's usually up to 72 hours, and there's limited relief that it can offer. It can require no contact and let you possess the resident. So he or she, the abuser, would have to leave the house for 72 hours. Then the next level is the preliminary protective order, the PPO we discussed. That is issued by a judge based on your sworn testimony, either in a written affidavit or the judge may want to talk to you personally. The legal requirement for the preliminary protective order is that the abuse recently occurred and there's immediate and present danger of further future abuse. It's usually up to 15 days to start, but can be continued up to 2 months if, for instance, the abuser had not been served with notice of the hearing. They can continue your preliminary protective order to a future court date. Your final PO hearing, that's the hearing that is, the date and time is going to be on your preliminary protective order, the 2-week protective order. It would tell you when you come to court to have a trial on your final protective order. Now, it's called final but the protective order can only go up to 2 years, so it's not actually final as in a lifelong protective order. The cases can get continued or moved to a new day if the respondent hasn't been served with its notice, or if he's in jail, or he has a criminal case and they want to schedule the protective order case after the criminal case has been heard. The respondent needs to hire an attorney. So there are different reasons why the respondent can request a continuance, but you can't. So you've got to show up and you've got to be prepared to go forward, because the petitioners are usually denied requests to reschedule the trial date to another day. The final protective order will be issued by the judge at the trial. The respondent must have an opportunity to be heard. The legal requirement is it is more likely than not that the abuse occurred and that the protective order is necessary to protect your health and safety. It lasts up to 2 years, or it can be longer if there's a conviction of certain felonies. And you do have a chance to file for an extension of that protective order, which you may be able to get it extended if something else has occurred while during those 2 years, there's been a further act of abuse. And there are lots of other relief that can be in your final protective order other than just that the petitioner can't contact you. And we'll get into these. Possible relief for a family abuse protective order, prohibiting further acts of family abuse, prohibiting contact with you or your family or household members, giving you exclusive possession of the residence. So if you get a final protective order in exclusive possession of the residence, that means your abuser cannot come to the house for 2 years. It can forbid the respondent from shutting off the electricity to the home or shutting off your cell phone. It can give you exclusive possession of your cell phone and prohibit the respondent from terminating the contract or using an electronic device to track the petitioner. And that has been added to the law because oftentimes people in an abusive relationship, because of control issues, the abuser controls the telephone. The abuser has the cell phone in his name and gives it to you, but it's in his name. He can get online and track you. He can shut the cell phone off as punishment. So it can forbid him from being able to do that. And it can grant you possession or use of a vehicle so that the respondent can't take the vehicle away and leave you stranded with no transportation or no transportation for the children. And it can require the respondent to maintain insurance registration and pay the taxes on that vehicle during the duration of the protective order. Sometimes the court will require the respondent to provide suitable alternative housing. And it can order the respondent to participate in treatment programs, such as require them to undergo a drug and alcohol assessment and follow the requirements or recommendations of the evaluation. That can be a possibility, for example, if the abuser assaults you when they're drunk. There's a pattern of that. It can also order the respondent to undergo it's called the Batterers Intervention Program, and it's a months-long course. It is like anger management, but it's tailored specifically for family abusers, people who abuse the person that they're in an intimate relationship with. And it's a very extensive and long course. It can grant you temporary custody of your children. And in temporary, meaning that it lasts as long as the protective order lasts. When the protective order expires, your temporary custody expires. It can grant you possession of family pets, and it can grant you temporary child support. Many of these things were found to be impediments, things that would inhibit a victim from filing for a protective order, such as, oh my God, if I file for a protective order, he's going to cut me off financially and I'm not going to be able to feed the children. Well, you can ask for temporary child support when you file for a protective order. Or, oh no, if I get a protective order, he is going to abuse my dog. Well, they put it in the law that you can ask for possession of your pets. Oh, he's going to keep the car and I'm not going to be able to get to work. Well, you can ask for temporary possession of the car. So all of these things are built in to make it possible for you to file for a protective order without all of these terrible things happening in response to that. Okay, so we talked about getting a protective order for non-family members. So that would be, for example, someone that you were dating, but you did not live with that person within the past 12 months and you did not have children with that person. Then you would file for a protective order in the general district court. It's in the same building, it's just in the front on the first floor. And the family court, the juvenile domestic relations court, is in the back. So it's in the same courthouse. And what relief you can get there is it can prohibit acts of violence, force, or threat, or criminal property damage. It can prohibit the person from having contact with you or with your family or household members. The difference is it can't grant you that family law related relief, such as possession of the home or temporary custody or child support, because you're not family or household members. After the protective order is granted, it is not effective until it's been served on the respondent. Service has to be handed to, can't be posted on their door. It has to be handed to them. The information about the protective order will be entered into a national database immediately. You can keep your residential address confidential and have it not be listed on the protective order. It can be enforced across state lines. For example, say you got your protective order in Loudoun County, Virginia, and you went shopping in Washington, D.C., and he started stalking or threatening you there or contacting you there, then the DC police can enforce that Virginia protective order, even though it's from Virginia. The protective order has firearm restrictions, varies by the relationship type. If you get a family abuse protective order, your abuser is not allowed to possess or purchase or transport firearms for the length of the protective order and has to actually either give them to someone else to hold or have them confiscated by the police. And there's a special law that if you get a protective order and you're in a lease, for example, you lease an apartment with your abuser, you can show that landlord your protective order and you can get out of that lease. You just have to give them 1 month's notice. So you'd have to pay 1 more month's rent and you can bail, just pay that last month's rent and you're out of that lease. They can't take you to court for violating the lease. A little more about the firearm restrictions. With any type of protective order, the abuser or respondent can't purchase or transport any firearm while in effect. And after any final PO, they can't knowingly possess any firearm after 24 hours after entry or purchase or transport any firearm at all while in effect. And there's a 3-year to lifetime bans on possession, purchase, or transfer for certain criminal convictions. Once the case is finished, once that final protective order is issued or denied, either of you can appeal the decision. You only have 10 days. The process is longer and harder for unrepresented people. It's much easier and your chances of success are much more likely if you're represented. Either party can request that the order be modified or dissolved at any time while it is active. And then you can request an extension if you do so before the protective order expires. So if you get a protective order that lasts 2 years and then you want to extend it longer, you can't wait for the 2 years to expire. Then it's too late. You have to file for an extension before it expires. Protective order violations. Well, a lot of people say, what good is a protective order? It's just a piece of paper. He can still hurt me anyway, and that's true. But most respondents will abide by the protective order because of the built-in punishments. They're not willing to undergo those punishments. If they contact you, they can even send you a text that says, hello, how are you doing? Suddenly that's a crime. If there's a protective order saying he cannot contact you, then texting you and saying, hello, hi, how are you doing? That is a crime. It is a misdemeanor. It's a criminal violation. Whoops, I lost my place there, sorry. It's a criminal violation of protective order. So if they were to contact you when you had that protective order, you want to call the police immediately, and that person will be arrested. They'll probably be out shortly thereafter, unfortunately, but the police will come and arrest them. There's also a law that says the third violation is a felony. So there's the step ladder where each violation, the second violation has a more serious punishment than the first. The third violation is a felony. So the protective order makes a crime out of what is normally not a crime. Walking up to your front door and knocking on your door is not a crime. But if you have a protective order, it's a crime for that person to do that. And that's where the power of the protective order comes in place. Okay, so you're in Loudoun County. How do you file for a protective order? Well, in the event that the police come to your house, you can ask them for an emergency protective order. They may not give you one, but you can ask that police for the emergency 72 protective order hour or 72-hour protective order that will require your abuser to get out of your house for 72 hours. Or you can go to the court, file a petition for a protective order, and try to get issued your preliminary protective order, the 2-week protective order. So you call or you go to the Loudoun County Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court to the section that's called the Court Services Unit at 18 East Market Street, Leesburg, Virginia. It's right by the post office. And there's the phone number to call. Protective orders against non-family or non-household members. It's the same procedure, except you go to the Loudoun County General District Court. It's in the same building. Both courts are in the same building. So you go to 18 East Market Street. Okay, for legal advice or representation by Legal Services of Northern Virginia, you can call this phone number to apply Monday through Thursday, 9:30 to 12, and between 1:30 to 3. Or you can apply online at lsnb.org. Now we have a new function where you can text to apply. So if you don't have a computer, you don't have the internet, but you've got your phone, you can text LSNV to this number and it will create a dialogue back and forth where you can apply by text. You can contact me if you have any questions about this presentation. I also wanted to plug the services of a really important domestic violence resource in Loudoun County, which I was an attorney at that organization for 9 years. And they're called the Loudoun Abused Women's Shelter. It stands for LAWS. They're also called LAWS. They also have attorneys there that can represent you in protective orders and family law cases if you're a victim of domestic violence. We have a low income requirement. And if you don't meet our low income requirement, you can go to LAWS. They have a much more lenient requirement. As a matter of fact, they may not even have a financial requirement anymore, but know that they have a shelter. They have a phone number that you can call. 24 hours a day. If you need the shelter, they have free counseling for you. They have free counseling for your children. They're just an enormous resource. And I'm going to unshare my screen here for a second. Unshare, stop share. And I'm going to put the information for the Loudoun Abused Women's Shelter. It's called Laws. They're at 105 East Market Street, Pittsburgh, PA 20176, and they are 703-771-3398. And hold on one second, I'm going to put their 24-hour hotline. You can call the hotline 24 hours a day. If you're in a crisis, you're being abused in the middle of the night, and you run out with your cell phone, you don't have any place to stay, you can call this 24-hour number. Just hold on one second. Hour hotline 703-777-6570. All right, so I'm sorry I went through that so fast. It's just a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much, Beth, for like insight of all the types of protective order that one can take to stay safe. I just will do a quick correction that we are in Prince William County. So people who are watching us, they will have to go to Prince William County courts to take protective orders if you are watching me in Prince William County.
Okay.
And then, as far as the Loudoun women, the laws, the shelter is concerned, can a person from other counties call them and get help, or does it?
Yes, you can. And there's also a Prince William. Let me give you the court information for Prince William. District Court is at 9311 Lee Avenue, first floor in Manassas.
So we will be sharing this information on our Facebook post as well. The numbers will be there. So please, if anyone needs help, you can go to the Facebook Live, and whenever you're watching the Facebook Live videos, and you will find this information there. I will be sharing this information via email as well. So everyone who is watching us via Zoom, if they have any questions for Beth, I will ask them to hold on until Taliba Hassan finishes her presentation, and then we will continue our Zoom call with Ms. Beth, if that's okay with you, Ms. Beth.
Yes.
Peace to you all.
Much.
Good evening, everyone. Beth, I really appreciate your clear presentation, and I think it's very important for people who might have fear to understand that if you go to the court, that a person cannot withhold rent over you or threaten you. I'm not going to pay the utilities. They can't take away your car. So these are important things, because oftentimes people don't want to report an abuser because they fear that they're going to their rent is not going to be paid, or their heat is not going to be paid, or the water bill, or the car is going to be taken away. So that's very important to know, that if you do a protective order and the judge gives you that protective order, then these things, you can tell the judge, I need my rent paid. I need to drive my car to work. So thank you very much, Beth. I think that was really important. It will take the fear out of reporting an abuser. I would like to just mention to my brothers and sisters that in chapter 4, verse 1, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord, who created you from a single person, created of like nature, his mate, and from them scattered like seeds countless men and women. Reverence Allah, through whom you demand your mutual rights, and reverence the wombs that bore you, for Allah ever watches over you. And in chapter 30, verse 21, and among his signs is this, that he created for you mates from among yourselves, that you may dwell in tranquility with them. And he has put love and mercy between your hearts. Verily, in that are signs for those who reflect. I think that's very important for us to understand that God has brought men and women together in marriage, and he wants us to love each other and have mercy. And this is what brings tranquility in the family, peace among husband and wife, peace among the children. So at Darul Noor, if you find that it's good to maybe, if you see that there's some problems arising, we have our imams. You can go to them, and that number to make an appointment is 703-580-0808. And I think you press 1 to leave a message. They have certain office hours, and you can go to our website, www.darulnoor.org, and check it out. All right, you can schedule an appointment. Also, sometimes problems come up and you realize beyond the imams, you might need professional counseling. There are people who are trained professionally, social workers and psychologists are trained to help husbands and wives, or maybe moms and sons, or dads and daughters, or siblings, sister to sister, brother to brother. There may be some problems that arise that you need professional help. All right. And we do have, if you have your own insurance, then you need to look among the providers and look for Islamic sounding names. Call them up, interview them. All right. See whether that you would be comfortable going and talking with them. Here in Prince William County, we have the Foundations of Psychological Services, which is a professional who deals with adults who attends our masjid. Also in Fairfax County, we have Wellness Through Counseling, and both the Foundations and Wellness Through Counseling. If you go on our health and wellness and look at some of our past presentations, you can hear them present. There's different presentations, and so you can get a feel for, would you like to call them up and make an appointment and go for counseling. All right. If you get to the point where you have to do a protective order, then really you really need to work things out, whether it means that you work things out over, if you get that 2-year period. If that the protective order, you can't call the person, and Beth will clarify that. I don't want to mess up what Beth just told you. I'm pretty sure you can't call the person, but I'm talking prior to, when you get to the protective order, then you have some serious thinking to do. You can talk to an imam, or you can talk to a counselor. What might be your next steps? And although we don't like it, Allah doesn't like it, but he does permit that people separate and divorce if it comes to that. So hopefully, when you see that you're having a problem, get some help. Let's not get to the point that you have to have a protective order for someone in your house, be it your spouse, be it your adult child, be it between two siblings. All right? Get some help the first time. And I'd like to leave you with, in our Quran, my Arabic is terrible, but there's lots of passages that deal with behavior. Oh, you believe. In Arabic, it's Ya Ayu Haladina Amanu. All right. There are at least 62 verses that begin with "O you who believe," or "those who have faith." All right. Then it talks about taqwa. All right. We have to have God consciousness. If you actually have God consciousness and you read and put into your everyday life ethical behavior, Islamic ethical behavior, then you won't have to do a protective order, inshallah. All right. And Beth, if I made a mistake, please correct me quick.
Oh, no. You can ask the judge, if you're there at a protective order trial, you can get a protective order that says the respondent is not allowed to do any abusive or harassive behavior. And you can still communicate with the respondent when you have a protective order that says that. It's just that if the respondent were to threaten you, send you a text, "I'm going to kill you," that would be a violation of the protective order, but it would allow for the two of you to have some conversation if you wanted to talk about getting a divorce or the possibility of getting back together. That would allow for communication. So, or if you get a protective order that allows for no contact, you can, and later you find that you do need to talk to the person about finances or about the possibility of divorce or the children, you can go back and file to amend the protective order. So you can get a protective order that it does allow non-abusive, non-harassing contact.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you so much, Sister Taliba. It was really insightful, Beth, your presentation on all the protective orders. And Sister Taliba, as always, your talks, your the meaningful, the mindful thoughts, and the talks always are on the point, and they leave us with thinking and reassessing ourselves to be better Muslims and better human beings in general. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope everyone stays safe. We have a vaccine clinic coming up this Friday. If you haven't gotten the vaccines yet, please show up at the mosque this coming Friday, January 28th, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Our next session, Facebook Live session, will be on February 23rd.